Hi folks, hope this finds you all very well. These videos are now coming thick and fast, aren't they? Sorry about that. My videos normally, when I'm not doing vinyl tags etc, are usually just vinyl update ones where I show new albums I've had since the last video. Thought I'd change that up a bit and show basically what I've been listening to in the last week or so, which might be new, might be old, might not even be vinyl. Anyway, first up, I'd like to send out a big thank you to John of Baggy Hifi fame. He did a shout out for me on his latest video. Thank you very much, John. If you don't know John's channel, check it out. It's very eclectic taste, great stuff, and if for nothing else, watch it for the intros. He does brilliant intros to his videos. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's subscribed. Just recently there's been a big increase. I think I've had about 25 subscribers in the last couple of weeks, which is great. Never thought. You must be all suckers for punishment. Anyway, let's get started. And first album I'd like to show is this one by Manor, a Welsh rock group. Formed in 1968, I think. They're sort of, if you don't know them, they're sort of like an American West Coast psychedelic jam band type of band. In fact, they've often been described as the sort of the Welsh Quicksilver Messenger Service. In fact, they actually did an album with John Cipollina of Quicksilver, a live album. This is their 8th album, released in 1973, and it's called Back into the Future. Show you the full cover. At this point, this is a double album. First disc is studio, second disc is live. At this point, they were initially, when they started this album, down to a 4-piece. There was the great Mickey Jones, a much underrated guitarist and vocalist. Terry Williams on drums. Terry Williams went on to play with Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds in Rockpile and became the drummer in Dire Straits. Phil Ryan on keyboards and Will Yowett on bass. They recorded the first side of this album, and after doing that they decided something was missing, and they decided that was a second guitarist was needed. Now that was something they were actually used to having. Normally that position was taken up by Deke Leonard, but he was on one of his many sort of vacancies from the band. He came and went. So they, for the second side, they got in Tweak Lewis, who was a young guitarist who was with the Jethro Tull offshoot Wild Turkey. First side is, like I say, studio. It's got 4 tracks. A Night in Dad's Bag is an excellent track. Don't Go Away is very West Coast. Side 2 is only 2 tracks, mainly instrumental. Ain't There Fight, which is superb, and the great jamming Never Say Nups to Nepalese. Sides 3 and 4, like I say, are live. They were recorded at the Roundhouse in London on June the 24th, 1973, and that features the 5-piece. And this live day was superb. They did extended jams, which they were renowned for. the tracks on here, it starts with actually with a Welsh male choir singing a Welsh traditional song. But then you get Come On, which is one of their great jamming songs that occupies the rest of the side. And on side 4 you get a track called Jam Up Jelly Tight. Superb stuff. If you're going to check out Man, check them out live first of all, because that's where they were at their best. I think they're still around, though I must admit I haven't heard it the last couple of albums. This actually did quite well. It hit number 23 in the charts in the UK, which is pretty good for them. And it sort of went down okay with the press. Melody Maker said, to quote, "The thing that makes Man tick is vamping and laying down the foundations and building floor upon floor of improvisation until you're listening to a musical skyscraper." Apt. And Record Mirror said, "They come over better on the studio sides where their natural exuberance is held under some sort of control. The live sides must have been fine in their natural environment, but on plastic they tend to ramble." Totally disagree. This band do not ramble. Excellent stuff. That's the first album. Next up, I dug out of the vaults this one, and this is John Cale with his album Academy in Peril. This was released, when was it released? It was 1972. It's his second proper solo album after, is it Vintage Violence? But his third album after leaving the Velvets. In between Vintage Violence and this came the collaboration with Terry Riley, Church of Anthrax, which is a brilliant album. Now, if anybody had listened to Church of Anthrax, they probably might have anticipated the sort of way he was going to go, but anybody that had listened to the Velvets or later Cale was going to get a shock with this. Cale was a classically trained musician, and this is an experiment of his into modern classical avant-garde music, and this is more, takes the role more of a composer than a performer, though he obviously plays viola and piano, I think, on this. You get some, actually, the first time I heard this I wasn't that keen, but listen to it now, I think this is a really good album that pays more listens. You get the beautiful, I think, Brahms, the second track, which is just a piano piece, 7-minute piano piece. Not being a classical expert, I don't know if the style of the playing matches the composer Brahms' work or not, but it's good. You then get Legs Larry at Television Centre. Now that's sort of like I think it's a solo instrumental viola piece, but over the top of it you get Legs Larry Smith of Bonzo Dog Doodah Band fame, taking the role of a sort of television director and speaking instructions from the recording booth. Amusing the first time, but to be honest I was enjoying the music and I could have done without that. The Academy in Peril itself is again another solo piano piece, a bit more avant-garde than Brahms. You also get a couple of tracks with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. You get one called 3 Orchestral Pieces, lasts 8.5 minutes. That's probably the least successful for my mind of all the tracks. Get the track King Harry, which is the only one with vocals on it, sort of very whispered and dark and quite menacing vocals really. And then you get probably one of the best tracks. This is the last, it finishes off with the track John Milton, and that features the Royal Philharmonic again, but this time with I think, well, I assume it's John Cale, it doesn't say here, playing solo piano. That's a really nice piece. Didn't go down very well, this album, I must admit. Like I say, people probably weren't quite ready for it. And Disc magazine said that apart from a couple of bright patches, it's very dry and humourless. The Royal Philly has been wasted, and Cale has wasted a tremendous opportunity. And Melody Maker said, a musical hodgepodge. Often this album appears as eccentric doodling. I can see why that might be said initially, but like I say, I think this one's more listens, and the more you listen to it, the better it gets. That's John Cale, Academy in Peril. Next up, this is one I struggle to describe this really. This is an album, their first album by a band called Swahili. They're come out of Portland, Oregon, and I think this was recorded on it. I think this was 2012 it came out, and they're sort of I say it's psychedelic, very dark psychedelic, lots of electronic synths with a lot of tribal percussion, mostly instrumental, though you do have a couple of songs with vocals which are usually mixed low and heavy on the reverb. I hear a touch of can in places, and one song particularly I think gets a little bit towards the industrial side, but not heavily. But I think it's a really good album. I hadn't listened to it in a long time. I think they've done at least one more album since then, which I've never heard. So that's Swahili from Portland, Oregon. Next one is, well, fairly new. I got this back in December, and it's the Long Riders with their album Psychedelic Country Soul. Now this was released in 2009, and I must admit I didn't know about it until December of last year. Back in the back in the mid-80s, I was falling out of love with music, really. I hated the 80s music. I hated what it had done to a lot of the bands that I liked. They'd either split up, gone into hiding, or were producing awful, pretty awful music. I'm not sure there was an artist that came to fruition in the 60s or 70s that really survived the 80s that well. Sorry if you like the 80s, but I can't stand the whole production style. I find 80s music more dated than any other. Anyway, like I say, I was getting tired of music. I wasn't hearing about the bands I liked, or they weren't doing anything worthwhile. So I'd stopped getting the music mags, etc. But then there came along a style of music that perked my interest and got me listening to music again, and that was the Paisley Underground, of which the Long Riders were one, along with bands like Rain Parade, Dream Syndicate, Green on Red, the Bangles, 3 O'Clock. And I loved that whole scene. And there was a small club in Manchester, International 2, which put a lot of those bands on. I saw the Long Riders there, I saw Green on Red and Rain Parade, and the Bangles, who were brilliant. Also saw Roger McGuinn there solo. Never did see the Dream Syndicate, unfortunately. Anyway, I think I can't remember when the Long Riders split up, but they've had a couple of reunions since. I knew they had got back together to do live gigs, but I didn't know that they'd released this album. And this is a really cracking album, typical of what you'd expect of the Long Riders. The only problem I had was when this arrived, both records are warped. So I got it through a marketplace seller on Amazon. Sent them a message, never heard back from them. So I eventually had to contact Amazon, who got me my money back, but the original company never asked for the record back. So I still got it. Even though it's warped, it is playable, thankfully. The only thing is not to look at the record while it's going round, because it plays this. Like I say, it's a double album. Plays at 45, and I think playing at 45, the warp seems even worse, and I keep on expecting the needle to skip across. But no, it plays okay. Highly recommended if you like the Long Riders and that whole Paisley Underground movement. Brilliant. Next up, now we get to something new as well, but CDs. And what we have first is this little set, Barbara Thompson, live at the BBC. 14 discs. They all look pretty much the same. This covers the period from 1969 through to 1985. If you don't know, Barbara Thompson is a saxophone player and flute player, a doyen of the British jazz scene back in the 60s and 70s and further on. First disc on this is mainly her with other bands as a accompanist, but then from there on you get her as a composer and as a band leader. The two main bands were Barbara Thompson's Jubiaba, I think it's pronounced, who were sort of more of a Latin-based sort of jazz band, and Barbara Thompson's Paraphernalia. Now that's the one I really like. I must admit, I didn't really know her work a lot until I saw that this was coming out, and I checked out some tracks on YouTube of Paraphernalia, and they're really good. I suppose you could class it as jazz rock fusion, but it's not really rock. It's more towards the jazz side of things. With the discs comes a nice booklet as well, with all the details. Great essay on the description of all the music. Really nice package. It's on the repertoire label. Now the Barbara, unfortunately, I think back in the 90s, was diagnosed with Parkinson's, a really debilitating disease, horrible disease, which I should know about because my father had it. But luckily, with I think the help of some new medication, she's got back into performing, which she had to stop a couple of times. All kudos to her. This is a really nice package. It's not that expensive either. I wonder if John, when he gets round to doing his British jazz video, will mention her. Excellent stuff. Now, Barbara, back in I think it was back in the late 60s, 67, I think, married John Heisman, of the great drummer of Colosseum fame. So I was married to him up until his passing a few years back. So this is another box set on the repertoire label of Colosseum's work. This is only 6 discs, not 14. That's how they look. They all look the same on the outside but have different inner pictures. I'm really a big fan of Colosseum's work. And this again comes with a really nice booklet. A lot of details in it. This one I haven't had a chance to listen to. The Barbara one I've listened to 6 of the discs. This one covers 1969 through to 1971, so you get 2 or 3 different lineups of the band there. But this, if it's the quality of the Barbara Thompson one, which I've got no reason to think it won't be, and because it's BBC recordings, will be really, really good. So that's. But if you like Colosseum, and if you don't want to buy CDs, then I would highly recommend this set. If I can get the cover off. And that's Colosseum Live 1971. This is a 3 CD set. 3 LP set. With that photo in the middle. Covers about 3 or 4 gigs, mainly from the University of Kent and the University of Manchester, and a couple from Brighton. This covers the period with Clem Clemson on guitar and my mind's gone blank. Who was the vocalist? Oh, I'll have to look him up now. This is a problem with old age, you know. You start to forget everything. Forgetting who I am. Chris Farlow. Okay. Yeah, this is the lineup with Chris Farlow on vocals. Now, he's not a lot of people's favourite vocalist. In fact, he's not my favourite vocalist. But I can put up with him. I don't mind him. But a lot of this is instrumental. So you don't get to hear him too often. But this is a really good this is on repertoire again. They've put out a number of live shows on CD, I think, which hopefully they'll get round to putting on vinyl. I think there's one from Finland, which I think is on vinyl, but the rest of them not. So, if you like 70s jazz rock, doesn't go much better. And that's it for stuff I've listened to, but what I'd like to show you is just to recommend a couple of books, if you don't mind. First up, if you're a Hawkwind fan, I would highly recommend this book. Hawkwind, Days of the Underground, Radical Escapism in the Age of Paranoia by Joe Banks. About a third of the way through this at the moment. This is an excellent book. Covers just the 70s. It has essays. It has detailed reviews of each album, interviews, all sorts. Excellent book if you're a Hawkwind fan. And this other one for all krautrock fans, Time and Sounds by Jan Rietzer. Germany's journey from jazz and pop to krautrock and beyond. As a foreword by Hans-Joachim Rodelius. this is excellent. I'm halfway through this one. Jan is German but lives in, I think, he grew up in this period, but lives in the States, I think, now. And this really takes you right through from the 40s through to the, up to, I think, about the late 80s, 90s, and shows you the growth of the scene. But the really interesting bit, it shows you, gives you an idea of the cultural, social and economic forces at play on the music at that point in time. Highly recommend this book. Right, that's it. Hope you're all going to be okay. Take care, and hopefully I'll be doing another one soon. Bye.